Hello everyone, welcome back to League of Legends DFS Esports Breakdown. For the slate we have upcoming, it is July 9th. We have a pretty interesting 5-gamer here, so we can quickly recap as we usually do, and then get into talking about the games up forward. So as you guys could probably tell, I'm a little sick for some reason. I don't know, it's like the third time in the past 3 months. Not feeling too bad, just stuffy nose and that kind of stuff. So not feeling the best, but we'll power through either way. Over in the LCK, one of our bigger stands, we were on Genji over T1. They got the first game and it looked pretty good for them. However, game 2 and 3 went to T1 pretty decisively. I thought it was going to be close. I thought Genji would have been able to pull it out. T1 just managed to outplay them in game 2 and 3, and I don't think there was really much else to talk about. I do think that, again, Genji's drafts are really, really bad. They keep putting Ruler on these supportive AD carries, and I'm really not sure why. This is something I commented on, I think, even yesterday, or maybe the series before when Genji played. But I don't know why they're putting him on these really bad picks. They just need to put him on a traditional 3-item scaling AD carry and kind of let him go to work. And we literally saw it happen in this series of exactly what I was talking about. We could see in game 1, they had the Jinx, Tahm Kench, pretty traditional bottom lane, but a traditional 3-item scaling AD carry within the Jinx. And they got the win, and then in the game 2 they went to the Ashe, which is a more supportive AD carry, and then the game 3 they went to the Senna Tahm Kench, which is again a pretty supportive AD carry play. So overall, pretty intriguing that they just don't learn, but I guess it's kind of the LCK thing at the moment, and kind of what they do somehow for some reason. So the slight favorite Genji go down there, and then the next one up was KDF versus KT Rolster. Again, this was a slight underdog pick that we did like with KDF, and they ended up getting the job done in 3. Again, it was kind of a series where it went pretty much exactly as we anticipated. I mean, that wasn't exactly a hot take. It was like a minus 150 KT or something, so it was pretty closely odds. Pretty closely, on the odds market. So saying it would be a close series isn't exactly a revelation, but we did get the nod. It did go our way. KDF got the job done in 3. Again, neither of these teams none of the LCK teams again really did much for DFS aspect. And although I know there is definitely some people who still like the viability of the LCK, I definitely think they do have their place for sure. However, we've just kind of seen it, I think, especially rear its head as both of the leagues transition over to the 12.12 patch. Don't know what it is. It's just a whole meta state of mind thing where the LCK are just playing slow. Not really much proactivity, and the games just go long and kind of get decided by one thing, and teams are not willing to really do much. I don't know. It's a little weird, but we'll just continue to look at the numbers, see if anything changes. But for now, not loving the LCK much. However, again, I do think the reads overall are not the worst. We did get the slight underdog here with KDF to kind of offset the Genji one a little bit there. So overall, not too bad. Over in China, we still had a couple of games. Let's see, where were we? Even further, week 5 already. Even further, week 5, day 2. There we were. So the first one up was Team WE versus OMG. This is one I definitely wanted to spend a little bit more time talking on. We could see WE still maintaining the same roster. I do think that they are looking a little bit better with this roster. I do like they're hopefully going to be able to stick together. Maybe they finally saw something together as the team and do something to it. Do something together as like the team that they are. Like, just stay as this 5 and hopefully let them grow and become a little bit better. But overall, it was a pretty interesting series, and this was something that I talked about yesterday and was very concerned with. and it was the fact that OMG, they've been looking good. They're obviously a team that I'm high on. They're a team that I've been riding, their trajectory upwards a good bit, and obviously very happy with that. Them getting wins over like the likes of EDG. Very exciting, but again, I thought this was a team maybe we should have pumped the brakes on a little bit. We did go with the OMG side, but I did have concerns that this series was going to be a little closer than it looked. And it did. WE got the first game. OMG ended up bringing it back and stomping out game 2 and 3. Game 2 was just a massive game from Shanji, 11-0 and 10. He's continuing to prove that he is an extremely strong top laner. And then in this series, we actually had a very, very strong performance from Cream in game 2 and 3 as well. So overall, pretty exciting stuff, I think, for OMG. Although, again, they did get stomped out in game 1. This draft seemed pretty bad. I don't love what they did here in game 1. I think they adapted a little bit better in game 2 and 3. They let Shanji get on his Comfort Rumble pick, and he looked pretty strong with it. So overall, pretty pleased overall with the kind of our assessment of this one. Again, I thought OMG would be able to pull it out, but again, I was slightly worried that the odds were a little exaggerated towards the OMG side, and I do think that it did end up panning out that way. So pretty pleased with that one. LNG, JDG, again, this is one where JDG was a minus 200 favorite. LNG ended up getting the first game win. I'm not loving LNG's drafts overall. I think they're pretty... I don't know how to word it, but they just don't work well with each other. There's not much coordination, I think, in full overall thought process of what their drafts are supposed to be doing. Usually when we look at like the concept of a overall team draft, it seems like everyone is supposed to have their place, and it just does not work out that way for LNG. There's a few traditional styles of compositions. Like there's a lot of things we see, like, I don't know, the Camille Galio Kaisa, where you all just press R on one person and you eliminate them and take the fight over, that kind of stuff. LNG does not seem to have that type of drafting, and we could definitely see the problems come out in game 2 and 3, where JDG ended up bringing it back and getting the series win. So although we did we did pick the LNG side, again, that's not one where I'm too pressed about being wrong, because we did talk about, and I did say, I do think JDG probably win this in 3, and it's going to be a close series, and I like LNG's upside for DFS specifically, so for that reason, I'm going all in LNG. They did obviously get 18 kills in their win. They had some pretty decent scores either way. I think LNG, despite them losing the series, I actually cashed a fair few, or I cashed both of my lineups with LNG, despite them losing the series. So they did perform well enough for us in the DFS aspect. So not the worst one. Again, we got this overall series wrong. It'll go down as a loss on the record sheet, but at the end of the day, we cashed the DFS lineups. The idea was there, and I think overall the action was, or the idea was good. The action was there, and it just didn't go our way there in like the game 2 or the 3. LNG just a little bit outclassed, kind of as we anticipated. So overall, again, feeling pretty good. Feel like our reads overall in the series have been pretty strong. We just gotta take our shots when we get them. Hopefully they go in our direction. Looking ahead, we do have the 5-gamer, which means we have 3 LPL games. Pretty interesting one. I don't know if these are in backward order, but we'll go from first to last. First is Anyone's Legend versus Ultra Prime. This is a pretty interesting one. I need to stop closing my Leaguepedia tab. But overall, we know I've obviously been riding AL a good bit as of late, the past couple of years even maybe. But I'm a big fan of AL. They pulled it out, beat Weibo here. They were close in the series with V5. Obviously, they got swept versus LGD. Don't get me started. But they're a kind of across the board hit or miss team, and I think that's exactly what they've been doing. They've been win-loss, 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 and then win. So they've been win-loss, 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 win. So far, they are 4-3. Is this time for them to lose? Potentially. I'm intrigued to see the price on this. The odds on this one is going to be pretty interesting. I expect AL will be a relatively decent sized favorite over Ultra Prime. If we do look at Ultra Prime, In their own right, they've had a little bit of a rough go of it. Their schedule has been pretty tragic in their own right. So that's something I'm going to look forward to here, or I'm going to talk about here. So first series, Ultra Prime versus OMG. The OMG had their substitute support in. Again, I said it last night, but these first couple weeks for OMG, I don't put much stock into them. They're a different team now for sure. So Ultra Prime getting this 2-0 over OMG is not that impressive, at the time. They lose 1-2 to BLG. We know BLG's struggles now are definitely very apparent. I definitely thought they were kind of what they were then also. So this loss to BLG is not exactly exciting. They 2-1 over RA, and again, I still think RA is probably a pretty bad bottom 4, bottom 5 team in their own right. So they played 2 close series versus BLG and RA, who I do think are accurately put in the 13th and 14th spots in the league. And I do think it's fair to have Ultra Prime a little bit above them here in the 11th spot. So I think overall, standings-wise, this is actually a fairly decent representation of the team. However, the kind of caveat here is that their last 3 matches have been pretty tough. And I don't know how much we could read into these either. Like, obviously, they got the game win over JDG. They got swept by Weibo and RNG, 2 or 3 much better teams than Ultra Prime. That's kind of the problem here, is I just really do not know where Ultra Prime is. It's pretty intriguing. I want to look at the odds now, because these should be pretty interesting. Whoops, that's a Call of Duty. Wrong esport. If we look tomorrow, LCK, LPL, there we go. So AL are actually minus 120 only. Huh. That's pretty interesting. I did not expect that. Granted, AL inconsistent. If you guys are, want to believe in this kind of stuff, win loss. It is, theoretically in time, due for a loss, and it definitely could happen here to Ultra Prime. I do think it is pretty close. The odds, kind of do make sense. Minus 120 AL, slight favorite. I don't know. I just kind of expected AL to be a little bit bigger of a favorite, honestly. Like, they've played better versus bigger teams. Granted, they do have, like, the getting swept by LGD. They do have some, like, marks on their record as well. But I would think after coming off of a win against Weibo, who is obviously a pretty much better team than Ultra Prime. I mean, Weibo 2-0'd Ultra Prime just not too long ago, only a couple weeks ago. I just thought AL would have been getting a little bit more respect here. So honestly, this is probably the direction I was leaning anyway. Of AL over Ultra Prime. Again, I do think AL is a pretty decent team. I think Ultra Prime are probably at the bottom of this kind of lower middle tier, if that makes sense. So if I'm talking about the league as a whole, I probably have. I mean, there's probably like WE, IG, LGD, the bottom 3. And there's probably like a little bit higher tier of like RA, BLG, TT. Then you could argue that there's this like kind of middle tier in the like contending for playoffs area. I do think AL is on the upper end of this tier. I think OMG's at the top of this tier. Overall, I would have Ultra Prime probably towards the bottom end of this tier. I think overall where these teams are in the standings is actually pretty fair representation of where they are skill-wise. And for that reason, I'm going with AL. I talk about them every time, every slate I pick AL. It's not a big, crazy thing here for me to say that. We know all the things. We know they are incredibly aggressive. We know that their upside for DFS is very positive. I wonder how expensive they are on DK. Wow, their price is the underdog on DK. That's odd. Oh, that's not good. Sorry. 1 second while I blow my nose, guys. My apologies, but, just kind of record myself talking, not a high production thing here. This is a pretty problematic thing on this slate when you have a slight favorite AL. Ultra Prime was Ultra Prime opened as the favorite. Wow, that's interesting. The line movement here is indicated by the fact that Ultra Prime are the -1.5 spread, so that they were the betting favorite. Just how Weibo is the betting favorite, -1.5. Toppy Sports betting favorite, -1.5. Dom One same way. Live Sandbox same way. So, Bovada opened this game as Ultra Prime as the favorite. That is interesting. And that means DK would have been on something similar as well. I mean, granted, I don't think AL should have ever been this cheap anyway. But man, that shakes up the slate for sure. That makes AL probably one of, if not the most popular team on the slate, because they're simply mispriced. Again, I do think, we talk about them as their DFS upside being incredibly high. I do think this is a pretty prime action-packed match, so you're going to want a side of it either way. And just the fact that the favorite AL is priced as the underdog is simply a problem. They're going to be super popular. I definitely think in a subjective sense, or sorry, in an objective stance, you could argue that Ultra Prime is a pretty good spot here for leverage, and you could probably get pretty cheap ownership on them. Like, obviously, they're priced as the slight underdog in the betting market, but on DraftKings, they're one of, if not the most expensive team on the slate. I mean, Zoom's the most expensive top laner, Elka's the most expensive AD, Xiaoxi's super expensive support. Like, they're all super expensive in their own areas. So it definitely could make sense that you want to pay up to get different with Ultra Prime there. I could definitely see the logic. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I do think that would be an objectively pretty good thing to do. I expect AL to probably be like 30 to 40%, and I think Ultra Prime would probably be like 10%. And we obviously know that AL don't outscore Ultra Prime for like 4 times as much, as maybe the odds, or sorry, like the ownership will be in AL's favor. So I definitely think objectively you probably should go towards the Ultra Prime side. However, I'm just not fully that type of player. I don't know. This one's pretty interesting, actually. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I'm sick and I don't want to just keep talking for no reason, but man, that's weird. That's pretty annoying. That's a pretty annoying thing on the slate. Oh, jeez. My apologies. I wonder if it's just allergies, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. That throws a weird spanner into the works here. I don't know. I'm still just gonna go with AL. I'll just eat all the chalk and try to get a unique build in other ways. But man, that's a tough sell. If there's an underdog you like if you do want to go to RNG or Nongshim, maybe potentially BLG. Like, if there's an underdog you like, I think pairing them up with Ultra Prime would make a pretty good lineup, and a good construction idea. So that's a good option for it. However, I think for most part tonight, I'm going to be a pretty chalk-heavy player. Unfortunately, as we transition over to the second series, we do have BLG swapping out Icon and Weiwei. They're bringing in a new mid and jungle. They're bringing in Can from their Academy roster, who did win the LDL Spring with BLG Junior not too long ago. As we could tell, they have a pretty solid Academy team. I think Myths, Rise, and Jayway, these are all pretty strong Academy players. So maybe it does feel a little unsure of where the talent is. Because again, I mean, these are players I know, and I don't follow this league that much. So I know Myths, Rise, and Jayway. When they played at Nest, they were very, very strong, relatively speaking, in their own right. If we do look, they went 4-2 here. I mean, they were pretty strong as a kind of sub-in Academy team. So this team is pretty decent. I think he can make an impact. However, this series is just a really tough one to ask from him. Uh, I just think this is going to be a step too far. I'm honestly surprised Weibo is only a minus 175 favorite here. I do think they are pretty inconsistent. There definitely is problems with Weibo. However, I think BLG have been playing pretty bad lately, and those odds are pretty crazy to me, if I'm honest. Obviously, Weibo did lose out last time to AL. They lost to TES. Like, they've been pretty inconsistent in their own right. They've had their problems. Their record isn't great. They're 4-4. I mean, they've lost to EDG, RNG, Top Esports. Losing to AL is not ideal, but they haven't looked great in their wins, as we talked about before. That was why we picked AL against Weibos, because even if they do like beat the likes of WE and RA, even IG back here, they've not done it consistently. They're only 2-0s over Ultra Prime here, so I see the problems with Weibo for sure. However, I do not think that subbing in your old mid laner who got replaced and now he's coming back in, they're bringing in an academy jungler in. I just feel like there's a lot of red flags there, and I feel like even the good players for BLG, like Doggo, Crisp, and Bin, who they should be pretty good, even they have not been playing well. So I just have a really hard time with kind of understanding these odds, to be honest. I feel like Weibo should be a pretty bigger size favorite. I feel like Weibo should definitely be like a minus. I could see this as like a minus 320 or something. Like, I could definitely see that being much, much more inflated. I feel like that just feels crazy to me. I feel like Weibo win this a lot. BLG have not shown much, and they're swapping out players. Like, there's a lot of problems there I do not want to get into with BLG, so I'm going to take Weibo. Their minus 1.5 is plus 165. That's probably not a bad idea, just because I do see these odds being kind of off, honestly, in my opinion. However, we know Weibo's inconsistencies, and they're willing to drop these games here and there, so that's probably not a great bet either way. However, I just think BLG are kind of just that bad, and I'm kind of surprised that the respect that they're getting in this betting market is a little crazy, in my opinion. So I'm going to go with Weibo, probably 2-1, maybe 2-0, but I think they should definitely win this a good amount of the time, and I'm surprised the odds are as close as they are in that one. And up next is Top Esports RNG, the marquee matchup. Pretty interesting one. Two top 5 teams, both record-wise and probably talent-wise. Pretty intriguing one overall. We have not seen the best from RNG. However, their only losses to V5, who's obviously 7-0. They're incredibly talented in the regular season, as we know. Top Esports, on the other hand, they are 6-1. Their loss is to JDG, who's again top 2, 7-1 in their own right. So both of these teams are obviously elite. They're both top 5. It is priced at minus 120. Top Esports is a slight favorite. In terms of lean, I'm honestly not sure. This is a pretty interesting one. Overall, I'm really unsure where to lean on this one. I feel like we've seen a lot of different stuff from these teams. We've overall not seen much from RNG. They've only played in 5 series so far. They've had a long break since their last game. And overall, I think this maybe could be the time where they show up. We saw it in spring, where there was a decent-sized break, and then RNG kind of came back and turned it around. I want to try to show that here. So here, this was the break, coincidentally enough, also against Top Esports, so maybe a little bit of fortune telling here, but RNG were not looking great throughout the split. They lost to FPX off the start. They barely beat JDG. Even these games against TT, AL, and IG, they were not convincing. Same with this BLG one here. Like, RNG were not looking great here, and they come back off this break, and I think they were underdog against Top Esports here as well. And they obviously got the 2-0. Then they, didn't look great for the rest of their split. This is the break, actually, I was talking about, so I was wrong. So they got swept by V5. They barely beat LNG. They got swept by RA. Then they have this big break and come back and then, start really winning games up until this last one. But, after the break is when they really turned it on. Are we in a similar spot? Maybe. I mean, this break was from the 22nd to the 2nd, so that's 2 weeks, 15 days or something, I think. 13 days maybe. I'm not sure. But either way, like we've seen RNG come back off these breaks. That's a little bit anecdotal, so I don't know how much you guys actually want to do with something like that. However, I just kind of have a hard time backing top esports here. Granted, it is very close. You could definitely argue either way. Like it's a 50-50 coin flip. I just kind of have to lean towards the talent side with RNG. As bad as it kind of feels, like if we were to look at their match history, it's not been great. Specifically their champions, they've been relying very heavily on Gala to perform well, and I think that's where the difference maker here is for me, is that Gala's been playing like probably the best player in the league. I think he's probably my early MVP pick if we had to pick something like right now. Despite V5 and JDG having these immaculate records, I mean RNG are 4-1. Let's not forget, like as much as we want to downplay how well that they are, the expectations for them are insane. Because they won MSI, they won the international tournament, so they're kind of perceived to be the number one team in the world, and they just have not been playing like the number one team in the world. I mean, they're still obviously top 5 in the best region. Like, I don't want to oversell kind of how quote unquote poorly they've been playing, but I think Gala's been the best player in the split so far, and I think that's where the problem can potentially lie for top esports. We have not been seeing much from Wei, Xiaohu, or Ming. Breathe has been playing decently. He's a little bit hit or miss, but Gala's been playing consistently very, very well. The problem is just kind of where the strengths are. If we look at top lane, it's a coin flip. Although I do think Breathe is the more consistent player. They're both pretty inconsistent. I could definitely see top lane being pretty volatile from Wayward and Breathe, and slight edge to Breathe. However, I could definitely see Wayward destroying Breathe in like one of the 3 games as well. The big problem, I think, is like for both sides comes down to the other 2 matchups, which is mid jungle and then bottom lane. So Tian and Knight have been probably the best jungler and the best mid laner so far. Like Tian has been destroying teams through the jungle, and I don't. Sorry, my nose is still just bothering me a bunch. But I don't think Wei has been playing that great, and I don't think Xiaohu's been playing great. And we'd obviously know that Tian and Knight are very, very strong jungle and mid. So definitely a big win condition there for top esports. Play through jungle and mid. And that's where the problems could lie for RNG, is because that's very, very influential. Like it can not matter how well Gala and Ming play if Tian and Knight are dominating their 2v2 and then they roam down bottom lane and they make things happen against Gala. If they keep Gala oppressed because Tian and Knight are winning their individual matchups, it could definitely come down and haunt the RNG bottom lane as well. But that's kind of the other other side of the coin, is that I do think RNG's bottom lane is a good bit better than top esports is. I do think Gala's obviously, as I just said, the MVP of the split so far for me. And they're going against Jackie Love and Mark, who are a bottom lane I personally don't respect that much. I do think Jackie Love is a pretty overrated player overall. I don't think Mark has been doing as much. Like, he's been a decent fill-in, like considering that they were just changing out their roster last split. Jeez. So I'm not high on this top esports bottom lane really at all. And I do think RNG have a good, strong win condition there with Gala. It just kind of depends on the flip of the coin. Like, we could definitely see a scenario where top esports win out through mid and jungle, transition that power down towards bottom lane. They put Gala behind, and then RNG's win condition is very, very tough to get going. On the flip side, Gala's just insanely good, and maybe he can make it work either way. And, the potential is there for sure. So for that, I mean, it's obviously priced as a 50-50. I'd be hard-pressed to say anything other than a 50-50. However, I just slightly lean towards the RNG side. I do think overall their players have been underperforming, but I think maybe they step it up, and this is the time. Coming off that short break, we see a strong performance from this RNG team. I'm pretty excited for them. I think this is going to be a good spot for them to kind of put their foot down. Hopefully we see a little bit better of a performance from Xiaohu. And hopefully that can kind of negate the path to victory I just laid out for Top Esports, and that can unleash Gala, let Gala and Ming play aggressively, win out bottom lane handedly, and I could definitely see RNG winning out that way. So I'm pretty excited for this matchup. Again, I think it could go either way. It's pretty close, but I'm going to lean towards the RNG side and Gala specifically, and hopefully Xiaohu has a little bit of a resurgence as well. So that'll be my pick there. I'm quickly going to run through the LCK. I don't want to spend as much time on it. Again, we talked about the reasons why, the stats earlier. So here are the numbers. Dumb1 Hanwha is expected to be 21.4 kills per map. LSB versus Nongshim is at 23.3, so pretty decent. However, AL Ultra Prime and Top Esports RNG are both over 26, so it's just so much more kills per map when it comes to averaging out the numbers from these LPL matchups. I mean, Damwon Hanwha is a full 5 kills slower than some of these LPL matchups, so it's just really hard to justify and look at the LCK outside of like the team slot one-off, as I preach quite often. I mean, even Weibo BLG is at 25, and that's definitely like a little under like a kill and a half away from from the other two LPL matchups. So they're definitely in the conversation as well. Specifically, if we look at losses, the teams who are giving up the most in losses are Ultra Prime, who obviously sets up great for AL there. Top Esports, who give up a good bit in losses, so pretty good for RNG. AL give up the most in losses. Looks like BLG actually don't do too much in losses, so maybe that is a slight hit towards Weibo overall. And again, as I typically preach, I do think the teams who die the most in losses are the ones where you want to target, and that's definitely very good for AL and pretty good there for RNG against their respective opponents. In the wins, as we know, RNG do pretty well. AL is not that great, but again, all these teams are above 0.8, which is a very, very strong number for combined kills per map. Combined kills per minute, for these teams. So I think it's pretty apparent the direction I want to go. I do think that maybe that could be a little bit of a unique way to get your AL shares in, is double dog pairing them with like an RNG. That feels like a pretty solid game plan for me tonight, pairing up AL with RNG, maybe mixing in a little bit of Weibo. But again, overall in the LCK, I mean, the average game times are pretty long for both of these teams. Dom1, I think, probably just handily take care of Hanwha, although Dom1 lost to DRX last time out. I think DRX is obviously a much better team than Hanwha. I think Dom1 probably just get this job done. 2-0. Their team slot in their 2-0s have been 60s, a couple 60s, a couple 50s. So it's a little bit hit or miss, but they're probably a pretty solid team slot spend up option if you do have the money, which is probably going to be possible if you are double dogging it like RNG and AL, for example. And then the other one I wanted to talk about was Live Sandbox Nongshim. So this is a pretty interesting one. So as you guys know, I've been riding Nongshim. As of late, they're extremely hit or miss. They always accrue these gigantic leads and then make these very, very bad decisions late and bottle it all away. If you look at the records, you're definitely going to be pretty confused as to why Live Sandbox is only a -175, and I could definitely see it. However, you just have to remember kind of how Nongshim are losing these games. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but we know Nongshim get these leads, bottle them at the end, and then the other team ends up coming through. They have wins over Hanwha and Kwangdong, so not obviously ideal from them. Live Sandbox, on the other hand, they just got the 2-1 over Hanwha, so not great from them. They beat Bro. They beat DRX, pretty solid win here. And their losses are to Dom1 and T1. They beat everyone else. This one's tough. I do think it's pretty close, just because we have seen Nongshim being able to accrue these leads. So if we're to look at kind of the whole league as a whole, and look at the early game ratings, Live Sandbox is a little bit lower. Nongshim is there, but I mean, if the big difference here is the middle late rating, Live Sandbox have the second best middle late rating, only behind T1, and Nongshim have the worst one by a good bit at -20, according to Oracle's Elixir's mid to late rating. And it does tell a pretty good story. I mean, the big difference here, of course, is going to be the gold difference of 15. Neither team is necessarily that great. They're both negative. Live Sandbox is a little bit worse. So obviously I do think the early game would be a little bit better towards Nongshim. And I wonder what the dragon rates are for this teams. So they both like the dragon a good bit. Let's see. Baron rate, LSB, Nongshim's is pretty low. I definitely think you could get to an LSB team slot. As much as I have been kind of riding the Nongshim bandwagon in some of their games, I think this is just asking way too much of them. I think Live Sandbox have actually been pretty good, and I definitely think they have good player. Talking about Prince there. So I definitely do think that's an option as well. Obviously, I think a lot of we'll look at the player stats here in a second to round everything out, but I'm going with LSB here. I don't want to stack them or get too much of them. We'll look at their players here in a little bit, but I think LSB win this probably 2-0, and I just think Nongshim's inability to do anything later is going to haunt them versus a team that's very good late. As we could see, I mean, T1 are kind of the pinnacle of being good in the mid to late game, and they're right behind them in the rating. And then we see Nongshim in the negative. Like, the gap here is gigantic, and I don't think the gap in the early game is that much better for Nongshim to kind of negate that. Obviously, theoretically, I would prefer my teams to be better early. That way they can build up these leads, and it's easier to close games out when you're ahead than behind, obviously. However, Sandbox's early game is a 43, Nongshim is a 51. Not a big gap there, 8 points. If we look at the mid to late, it's 20 to negative 20. That's a 40-point gap, and that's gigantic for this. Fred at Brion's only at negative 30. There's only 5 teams in the negative here. That gap is gigantic, and it feels very hard to get away from Sandbox here. And again, this is a spot where I'm honestly a little surprised that the odds are this close. I think Live Sandbox are a good bit better than Nongshim in this spot, unfortunately, as much as I do love Nongshim, and they kind of have a soft spot in my heart. The problem definitely could arise where Nongshim snowball a game and it gets out of control. However, their inability to win games is just insane. So I'm fine going with the LSB team slot. I like that option to get a little bit unique as well. I do think people are going to get up to the Dom 1 team slot. They're probably going to be 20-25% in their own right. Because they are minus 1,000, they are a slow LCK team. All the things are there for Dom 1. I don't think they're bad either. I wonder what Weibo's is. They've only had 1 2-0. LSB 2-0 66, 55-52. That's not the best, but I think that it's a viable option. Again, it's a good way to get a little bit unique as well. Nongshim typically play pretty slow. They have one of the slowest average game times, as well, a little over 35 minutes, even slower than Fred at Brion's, although they just kind of lose fast now. So LSB team slot, I do think LSB's player, maybe more than one player, have potential. 23.3 is not bad, so they're going to be in the mix for me. So it's going to be all 4 series here for me. I like LSB, I like AL, I like Weibo, and I like RNG. So 2 kind of pick'ems with AL, slight underdog here with RNG, slight favorite AL. And then I go with Weibo and Sandbox, are both minus 175. However, I think both of these should be a little bit better. These are all very bettable lines, and I think that's pretty rare here. So if you guys wanted to take a more betting stance for tonight, I do think that's a pretty good option. I think round robining these and parlaying a couple or all of them in different ways I think could make it for a pretty good night. I think LSB and Weibo should be bigger favorites than minus 175. I think AL should be a bigger favorite than minus 120. And I do think this price on Top Esports RNG is fair. However, I just kind of have a feeling here with RNG on this one. So as I take a sip of my water, I'll load up and talk about the players here. RNG, anyone's legend. LSB, and Weibo Gaming. So hopefully this picks up everyone 1, 2, 3, 4 about all the teams we're looking for. So as we usually do, we'll go by the groupings. Obviously no Sword Art playing, but Betty, highest skill participation, his grouping up with Chocho, Forge, and Xiaohao is all pretty strong, all above 70%. I'd love to see that. Very strong grouping, very strong stack there. RNG grouping is pretty strong as well. Ming, Xiaohu, Gala, and Wei, all near 70% or above. For LSB, it's pretty clear it's going to be Kale and Prince, maybe Croco there as well, but looks like Closer and Dove are pretty low, in their own right. Overall, grouping-wise, Weibo pretty bad. LSB is kind of across the board, not great either. I think RNG and AL have pretty strong groupings and are definitely a good option. But we'll quickly go through kind of position by position. Again, not much to talk about. It's usually pretty normal here. In terms of what we're going to say and look for. So typically, I like 60% kill participation as my top laner. It looks like all 4 are definitely viable. You can mix and match however you'd like. The upside, I think, for somebody like the Shy is pretty decent. I don't know. This is a weird one. It feels like kind of a crapshoot of where you want to go here. Usually as a tiebreaker, I'd look at something like champion pool, but none of these players particularly have great champion pools for this. I would say maybe the Shy has the more kill upside, but I mean Breathes out killing him either, so it's kind of across the board. You could kind of pick and choose and build however you want here. There's no preference or lean here really for top lane here. I am a little bit attracted to the Shy as much as I want to shit on him as a player. His upside in something like this could be pretty decent. His ability to rack up kills is actually inconsistent, that's for sure, but I think overall pretty good. For junglers, I think all are fine. Obviously, I think SOFM is probably the one I would try to avoid. His numbers are just pretty bad, although his numbers are not that bad compared to everyone else's. I just feel like sometimes I watch their Weibo games and he's just uninvolved, and it can cause problems. So I would prefer to look to get to Xiaohao or Croco or Wei, depending on how you're stacking. I think SOFM would be the one to avoid. However, again, I wouldn't say X them out of your player pool at all. For mid lane, I think all but Closer are fine. I don't love Angel. I would prefer to get up to Forge or Xiaohu. Again, Xiaohu might be a buy low player here. I mean, I feel like we've been saying that for a few series now, but the potential's there. We know Xiaohu has the best player in the world potential, and he's just obviously not playing to that level yet. We know Forge is going to be heavily involved. We know Xiaohu's probably going to be heavily involved. I think all 4 are fine. They're all 4 playable. However, I would look to try to get to the LPL mid laners, Forge and Xiaohu. Probably try to avoid Closer. Probably try to avoid Angel as well. 80 carries, again, all are fine. Betty's numbers are insane. But typically you just want to stack these up. You will try to get as much of these players in. Their kill shares are just pretty insane. Their kill participation numbers are definitely good enough. If we're looking at like Huanfeng, I think Gala is obviously a very strong player. Prince's kill shares, honestly astronomical. I think he's probably number 1 in the whole slate, I'd have to guess, in kill share. Yeah, I mean, it's Prince, Gala, Betty, Huanfeng, and then Wei is 7% lower. So it's pretty clear how these teams are playing through their 80 carries. So I definitely would try to stack them up as much as possible and build up that way. For supports, this is a pretty interesting one. They're all very strong. All 4 of these supports have very, very great numbers. 73% as the lowest kill participation is pretty insane. So it's definitely just kind of however you want to stack up and however you want to mix and match them. Whoever you're stacking with, you'd probably want your support there as well, because if your team's winning, your support's probably racking up assists. So no hot take here. Again, it's just kind of whoever you're stacking with. I don't think there's anyone I'd prefer trying to target here at all. Just however you're stacking. So yeah, I think that'll be it for me today. My throat is pretty gone, so apologies for a little bit of an odd style video, but hopefully we got everything out there that we were talking or that we were looking forward to. So I'll go ahead and just get out of here. I'll best luck to you guys all tonight, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. I think maybe the 2-gamer start back up tomorrow. I don't know. LPL. I don't know. Oh, whatever. Just obviously, quick note: if it's a 2-gamer, I'm most likely not going to be making a video on it. Just not worth the time, honestly. Just being honest here. So, if it is the 2-gamer starting up again tomorrow, I will not be back for them. But I'll see you guys when I see you. Thank you guys for tuning in.